The Old Testament is the book of the New Testament church, so it's a problem to say that I'm a Christian, therefore I'm a New Testament Christian. If you open up the first page of the New Testament, what does it say? First page, first verse. This is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Whoa, who's David? Where do I read about him? The Old Testament? I guess so. Abraham, now, he must be New Testament, right? No, Old Testament. And so what you have, when you go to the first page of this book that we call the New Testament, you have a message that says, what are you doing here? Do you know who these people are? Because I'm going to tell you about Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ didn't just suddenly come onto the earth, but he has a history. He's prophesied from of old. He was promised to somebody. He comes in terms of a context, and if it could be any stronger, I don't know how it could be, because Matthew goes through a list of 14 generations, then another 14 generations, and another 14 generations. Gee, where are those people from? The Old Testament. Well, then, that's how we get started in the first book. And you go on through to the second book, Mark, and what do you have? Mark using imagery from the prophet Isaiah. Everywhere in his first chapter, and then throughout the book, he's using this imagery that he picks up from Isaiah's prophecy, his majestic book. Mark says, you have no business here until you go back and read Isaiah and read the Old Testament. Then you can understand what I'm talking about. The material foundation of Jesus' ministry was that this is what is written about me in Moses and the prophets and the Psalms. So consequently, even if you want to call yourself a New Testament Christian, what does the New Testament tell you? The New Testament tells you, go back to the Old Testament. Now that's just the beginning. When you go through the book of Acts, in their discussion as to what the pivotal change in administrations is, as we come into this new world that's come about because of Christ's work, what is the critical change? Is it that the Old Testament's no longer valid or functional? No, it's that Gentiles can become Jews without becoming Jews. That is, they can become Jews without being circumcised. And that means that the distinctive peculiarities that were associated with the Jewish people before Christ are no longer binding upon Gentiles. And so this gospel that was located in Israel and that was acted out every day in the sacrifice of the temple service, in the work of the priests, in the offerings, in the feasts, in the calendars, and so on and so forth, these things now have come to rest in Jesus Christ, about whom they always spoke. They were always looking forward to him. There were arrows all along the way pointing. Look to Jesus to find the meaning of this sacrifice. Look to Jesus to find the meaning of this service in the temple, this priesthood. Now Jesus has come. The meaning has come. He's taken it all up in himself. He's gone up into heaven. There is a temple. There is a kingdom. There is a city. There is a church there. And now on earth you have outposts of what's happened in heaven, the final fullness that's there anywhere on earth. And that's the big difference. The law didn't change. The Old Testament didn't change. God's morality didn't change. God didn't suddenly say, well, now that my son has done his work, it's okay if you don't worship me. It's okay if you have other gods. It's okay if you have no day of rest. It's okay if you commit adultery. It's okay if you commit murder. God's values didn't change. They're eternal. The Lord never changes. He never varies. What happened in the New Testament is that this law has shed those things which kept it local and has gone up to heaven, and from heaven is poured down on the whole world. The best way to think about the Old Testament is not the Bible is not Old Testament, New Testament. The best way to think about the Bible is that it is one book. It has an anticipation and a working out in history prior to Christ, and then the final chapter is written in the New Testament. I know it's 27 books. We call it 27 books, but it's really the last chapter of the Old Testament. The New Testament church's book was the Old Testament. When Paul wrote to Timothy, he told him about the scriptures that he had known from childhood, which are able to make you wise for salvation through Jesus Christ. Now, how could that be if that's for the Jews and not for Christians? To be wise for salvation in Jesus Christ sounds pretty Christian to me.